Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. This week, in the 1920s, Oscar Micheaux was an entrepreneur filmmaker in Western Virginia. He became a world-renowned director and producer.
Just imagine if Tyler Perry had his film studio here. Imagine what that would look like. Well, that's who he was in 1922.
Kentucky's poet laureate lives down the road from what has been called the country's most lethal cryptid. Attempts to spot it have led to deaths.
There have been 5 since we've lived here, and they're mostly young people who really don't understand what they're getting into.
And we talk soul food with Xavier Oglesby, who's passing on generations of kitchen wisdom to his niece.
When you think of soul food, that's the first thing you think is black folk, because we were able to take nothing and make something out of it for a meal.
You'll hear these stories and more this week inside Appalachia. Welcome inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. One of America's pioneering filmmakers had nothing to do with Hollywood, but nevertheless left his mark on the emerging industry. Oscar Micheaux was a homesteader who then turned his attention to making movies in the early 1900s. He was a black man who made movies for black audiences at a time when they weren't allowed into mainstream white-only theaters. And for several pivotal years in the 1920s, he operated out of Roanoke, Virginia.
Generally, Oscar Micheaux was one of the most prolific independent filmmakers in American history. But he was also a pioneer in black film.
E.B. Smith is executive director of the Harrison Museum of African American Culture in Roanoke.
He was one of the first mainstream filmmakers back in the silent era and moving into the talkies in the 30s. He spent a good portion of his career actually here in Roanoke on Henry Street making movies here in town.
Micheaux was born in Illinois and worked as a Pullman porter on the railroad before becoming a homesteader in South Dakota. He wrote a novel, The Homesteader, about the experience and was subsequently approached by a company that wanted to make it into a feature film. Micheaux decided to do that himself and launched his career as a producer and director. He went on to make more than 40 movies, and not only that, he handled all the business around his films. Ian Fortier is executive director of the Grandin Theater, an independent Roanoke film house that dates back to 1931.
Behind the camera, he was somebody that protected and insulated his entire creative process. You know, not just the vision of the artistic nature of the film in his head to paper, but all the way through casting, all the way through shooting, all the way through editing, and then all the way through the rights and the deals of distribution. I mean, he really protected his product, and he wanted to make sure that the art and the messages that he was creating was not influenced or tarnished in any way.
Micheaux's first film adapted The Homesteader. His second, Within Our Gates, was an artistic response to D.W. Griffith's racist blockbuster Birth of a Nation, which vilified black men and glorified the Ku Klux Klan.
He challenged Jim Crow, and he challenged the sort of predominant narrative created by a ruling class by showing not only incredibly productive aspects of the black community, but highly educated, highly engaged. That was one of the greatest things that he contributed, was creating a narrative that helped shift social aspect about the contributions made by the black community in the American landscape.
Soon after Within Our Gates was released, Micheaux opened up offices in Roanoke. At the time, Roanoke was home to a booming black business district on Henry Street.
During that time, Henry Street was sort of a mini Harlem.
Jordan Bell is a neighborhood leader and historian of Roanoke's Gainsboro neighborhood, which is home to Henry Street. Bell says that when Micheaux was in Roanoke, he was just an entrepreneur filmmaker.
But now, he's recognized around the world. You know, just imagine if Tyler Perry had his film studio here. Imagine what that would look like. Well, that's who he was in 1922.
Roanoke, and specifically the Gainsboro neighborhood, was part of the global movement that became known as the Harlem Renaissance. Micheaux stayed in a hotel directly across the room from his film offices. He may well have frequented the Lincoln Theater, a 700-seat venue that was open for decades under various names, and hosted Duke Ellington, Ella Fitzgerald, Count Basie, and other jazz musicians. Micheaux operated in Roanoke from 1922 to 1925, producing 8 films during that time, including Body and Soul, which launched the career of standout actor Paul Robeson, and The House Behind the Cedars, which featured a cameo by future civil rights lawyer Oliver Hill Sr. E.B. Smith says, Micheaux didn't just show the world a different side of Black life. He used his control over the process to take on ideas that just didn't appear in white cinema.
He was chronicling migration and patterns of movement for Black life that a lot of people weren't. He was also showing the world a side of African American life that was not widely accepted or explored, especially within the arts. His films were not the sort of traditionally digested vaudeville exports that a lot of Black characters in cinema were at the time. You know, he was telling very serious stories about whole people, and that was revolutionary.
That revolutionary spirit made a big impression on Black filmmakers in a way that continues today. Jordan Bell again.
Remembering people like Oscar Micheaux is very important because it sort of inspires the next generation. I'm sure Tyler Perry knew exactly who Oscar Micheaux is. I'm sure Spike Lee knew exactly who he was. I'm sure the small filmmakers that are making short films today, I would hope that they know exactly who he is, but I think that's why it's important to remember him.
Oscar Micheaux died in March of 1951. Many of his films, including all of those shot on location in Roanoke, have disappeared. Film stock doesn't always hold up and is susceptible to breaking down. But some of Micheaux's fans hold out hope that his Roanoke films are still out there and may yet appear. In the meantime, several of his films can be seen, either in collections or on streaming services. The Grandin Theater and Harrison Museum of African American Culture showed several of them in February for Black History Month. And the crown jewel in Micheaux's filmography, Within Our Gates, is available to view online. Visit our website, wvpublic.org, and we'll post up a link. Acclaimed playwright August Wilson was deeply influenced by his hometown of Pittsburgh. Wilson was the author of 10 plays, collectively known as the Pittsburgh Cycle. They include the Pulitzer Prize-winning plays Fences and The Piano Lesson. Now there's a new book about him, titled August Wilson's American Century, by University of Pittsburgh professor Lawrence Glasgow. And it explores that deep influence with his hometown. WESA's Bill Driskell spoke with Glasgow and has this.
Did you know August Wilson yourself?
I had met him. I can't say he was a friend or that I knew him personally in that way. I teach a course, History of Black Pittsburgh, and I knew his sister, Linda Jean, and she invited him to my class once, and he gave a talk in the class, and that was wonderful for the students.
Everyone knows that he was born here, lived more than half of his life here, and that 9 of his 10 Century Cycle plays were set here. But what is underappreciated about Pittsburgh's influence on August Wilson?
Well, it wasn't that it was just the setting for his plays, but it was also a community of fellow writers. Wilson wasn't a lone bird singing to himself outside. There were talented writers, musicians, artists all around him. It was a very rich cultural venue that he could draw on.
And you talk about his kind of formative artistic years, which were in like the mid-'60s into the '70s in Pittsburgh, when he was in his 20s, and in this community of artists that you're talking about. And you go into considerable detail about some of the venues that these artists operated in and gathered around, places like the Halfway Art Gallery in the Hill District.
Yes, the Halfway Art Gallery was a terrific gathering place for artists, musicians, poets, and it made it a center of the cultural activity in the Hill.
You also talk about the Black Action Society at Pitt and Black Horizons Theater, which were linked to some degree, as being really important in August Wilson's artistic formative years.
Yes, the Black Action Society at Pitt and Black cultural activities at Pitt also nourished Wilson. He was never a really active member of those. He was always very independent, but he just swam in that water, so to speak, or lived in that milieu. And it helped him, it kept his consciousness focused on the black experience in ways it might not have been otherwise.
Right. And you talk about him being independent, and that's very much a theme of the kind of person he was, by temperament perhaps, kind of an outsider, right?
Yes.
In a lot of ways. I wonder if you could talk about that aspect of his character.
Oh, that was very important. People often think, oh, the outsider, that means he's not liked, he's a bad person or whatever, a loner and all this. It wasn't that at all. He was an outsider in the sense that he, in addition to being an insider, hanging out with his buddies and friends and conversing with them, he also would step back and listen, just listen.
Right, right. And there's been obviously a lot written about August Wilson over the years. What do you think your book brings out that maybe some of those other writings have not?
Well, one, I think it brings out what a fertile ground the Hill District provided for an artist like August Wilson. People think that urban renewal destroyed the Hill and it was nothing left. Well, August Wilson came on the scene just a few years after urban renewal tore out the heart of the Hill, but it didn't tear out the spirit. And August often talked about how exciting it was to walk down Center Avenue. It was just bustling, full of people, parents with their children, guys who were on dates with their girlfriends, and things like that. So it was a very lively setting for somebody like him.
So he famously left Pittsburgh when he was 32 in the late 70s.
Yeah.
And really all of his playwriting success came after he moved away from Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Did his relationship with Pittsburgh change?
No, I don't think really. I don't think it really changed. He remained a Pittsburgher. He would come back several times a year, partly to see his mother, family, but also to see friends and things like that. Even when he was in St. Paul, he remained very much, his head remained very much in Pittsburgh. Friends of his in St. Paul, when he moved there, say how much it was always Pittsburgh he wanted to talk about. So he was always thinking about things he had done, things he had heard, people he had known from Pittsburgh. It was really remained a part of his life throughout his time that he was outside, living away from Pittsburgh. He was always thinking about it.
That was WESA's Bill Driskell, speaking with author Lawrence Glasgow. August Wilson's American Century is available from the University of Pittsburgh Press. Coming up, we find out how the sausage gets made at Angelo's Old World Italian Sausage. You're inside Appalachia. I'm Mason Adams. In 2023, Folkways reporter Zach Harold took us to Angelo's Old World Italian Sausage. Angelo's makes a craft sausage distributed throughout West Virginia, as well as southern Ohio and eastern Kentucky. The recipe comes from the Calabria region of Italy, and it's made in West Virginia.
So we're going to make a mix here that's not mild or not hot, somewhere in between. How do you like it?
I'll eat anything.
Okay. So
Louis Argento is elbow deep in a mixing bowl filled with ground pork and a closely guarded blend of spices. His dad, Sonny Argento, is supervising.
how do you say fennel in Italian?
Finocchio.
Finocchio.
This is crushed fennel.
No, this is a whole.
No, whole fennel, I'm sorry. It is not crushed fennel.
Most Italian sausages have use crushed fennel. We use whole seed, and you can actually see it.
We're in the dining room of Sonny's tidy little house in Charleston, West Virginia. Louis and Sonny are introducing me to the Argento family sausage, a recipe that's brought pride and acclaim to their Italian clan for nearly a century. Usually, once the meat is mixed together, the family stuffs it into natural sausage casings. But this time, Louis patties the mixture out like hamburger and throws it in a skillet. The Argentos like their sausage on pizza, in spaghetti sauce, or served on a hoagie bun, but they'll eat it for any meal of the day.
We like it with fried eggs and applesauce in the morning. You know, apples and pork generally goes well together. So we do applesauce or fried apples, even better, with some toast on the side.
Sonny is 82 now, and he's been eating this stuff all his life. The recipe came from his mother's family, who hailed from the Calabria region of Italy. He grew up hearing stories about how his grandfather made it in the old country.
So they would chop the pork up with a knife, with knives. I mean, they didn't have any electricity. They couldn't grind the pork, so they would chop it up as fine as they could get it, which wasn't very fine. Mixed a seasoning in it, and he had a hollowed-out cow horn. My grandmother would clean the casings. If you don't know what a casing is, I'm not going to tell you.
I'll tell you. They're intestines. Natural sausage casings are animal intestines.
But she would clean the casings really well, and he would skinny them up on the cow horn and stuff it with his thumb.
Sonny's mother eventually taught the recipe to his father, Angelo Argento. His side of the family came from Sicily. Angelo actually came to West Virginia from Sicily when he was 6 years old. He became a coal miner at just 13. But when he wasn't below ground, Angelo was working for a local grocery store. By the time he was 26, he left the mines to start a store of his own, 3.5 miles up Powelton Holler in Fayette County. He called the little shop A. Argento and Company.
He said 2 men could stand fingertip to fingertip, and the other hands could touch the wall. But yet he sold almost everything in there.
That store only existed for about 5 years before it burned to the ground. Angelo didn't have any insurance, and he didn't have much in the way of savings. But he was already so well known for his work ethic and honesty that a bank in Montgomery loaned him the money to build a new store on little more than a handshake. He called this store Angelo's Market.
This guy had a 4th grade education, but nobody's fool, and you weren't going to beat him out of a nickel.
In 1960, young Sonny Argento found himself stationed in the mountains of Turkey with the U.S. Air Force. He was 20 years old, away from Fayette County, West Virginia for the first time, and chronically homesick. He borrowed another airman's reel-to-reel tape deck and recorded an audio message for his family back home. When they got it, they borrowed a reel-to-reel to make a recording of their own and mailed Sonny the tape.
I think my mother says the first words.
Hi, Sonny. How are you?
Everybody in the family passed around the microphone, telling him about ball games they won and report cards they got and colds they caught. When it was Sonny's dad's turn, Angelo made sure to give an update on the family meat shop.
And my dad said, we made some pepperoni this week.
Well, you should have been here this week. We sure had some weather. It's been below zero. Then I made some pepperoni the other day.
Pepperoni is what Angelo called his sausage.
And sure was cold.
When he heard the tape, Sonny says he immediately pictured his father's grocery store, the meat shop and its big metal sausage mill with the feet nailed to the wooden carving block. He could see his father spooning the fragrant mix of coarse ground pork and spices into one end and turning the crank, and he could see his mother on the other end, catching the long links of plump pink sausage as they spilled from the machine. It did very little to alleviate Sonny's homesickness. But after 5 years in the Air Force, he eventually made it back to Fayette County to help his father run the business. He took over completely in 1977, a few years before Angelo passed away. Sonny raised his 5 kids in that market, but you can probably guess where this is going. A small, family-owned store trying to stand against the tide of big-box megamarts and the dollar stores that seem to crop up in every Appalachian holler. More and more customers were lured away, and the Argentos just couldn't compete. Angelo's Market closed in 2008 after more than 70 years in business. But here's the thing. The family didn't just lose the family business, as Louis Argento explained to me.
We had no need to go to Kroger or to Walmart or any other store to shop. And when our store closed, we realized, which kind of sparked our business of today, that there was no quality Italian sausage in the stores.
So they just kept making it. First in Sonny's kitchen, and then in a makeshift meat shop they set up in his garage. Once family and friends found out, they started getting orders.
A lot of people, especially still the Italian Americans around here, they like the sausage for their Christmas dinners or holiday parties. So Next thing you know, we have an order for 500 pounds of sausage.
The demand was so great, Sonny decided maybe it was time to try a new kind of family business. There was a problem, though. It's fine to make sausage in your garage for family and friends, but the government doesn't really want you to sell it. Luckily, one of Sonny's friends owned a few grocery stores in Charleston and loaned the family the use of a meat shop. By making it there, the Argentos could sell their sausage in the store and offer it to local restaurants. They named their product Angelo's Old World Sausage. The label features an old photo of Sonny and his dad Angelo in ties and white aprons, grinning in front of the old store's meat case. They made the sausage in that grocery store meat shop for about 2 years, but they eventually outgrew the space. For one thing, they couldn't produce as much sausage as they needed. And because it wasn't a USDA-inspected processing facility, the Argentos couldn't sell their sausage in other stores. For a while, they considered building a factory of their own, but that was too big of an investment for such a small company. So they started looking around for a co-packer. After some searching, they found Wampler's Farm Sausage in Lenoir City, Tennessee. It's also a family business, albeit one with a modern solar-powered meat processing facility attached.
And I saw all these guys in white coats and a federal inspector walking around with their arms folded, and a tear came to my eye. I remembered my mom and dad standing over the meat block making sausage and me helping them. And occasionally my mother would have to put her finger in it and touch it to her tongue and say, it needs more salt. And I'm thinking that we can no longer do that.
Wampler's factory can turn out as much sausage as the Argentos will ever need. And everything is still made to the family's exacting standards, from the coarseness of the ground meat to the blend of spices that gives the sausage its flavor.
We sample every batch still. So, we just want to, as good as Wampler is, we want to make sure our sausage that our customers are buying is consistent.
Back in Sonny's kitchen, as the smell of fennel and frying pork filled the air, Louis told me the appeal of Angelo's sausage is as much about what doesn't go into it as what does. There are no binders or additives like you might find in big commercial sausages, and no preservatives.
And it's a joy to give people a bite of our sausage for the first time and see their face light up. And they're like, man, I've never tasted anything like this before. So yeah, so go put your corporate sausage down and get some really good stuff here that has no preservatives in it.
But the same economic forces that put Angelo's market out of business make it difficult for Angelo's Old World Sausage, too. Their products are now available in about 30 stores in West Virginia, Ohio, and Kentucky, but that growth has been a struggle. Louis says it can be difficult to convince managers to carry their product when every square inch of a chain grocery store's meat case is rented out to major corporate producers. And Angelo's isn't a big enough player to get into the big box stores' warehouses, so their sausage doesn't appear in shopping apps. That's left the Argento family to depend on a more grassroots approach, one based on word of mouth and some social media advertising and setting up taste tests in grocery stores. They're confident that if they can just convince folks to take a bite, they'll be hooked.
Yeah, well, you want to take it in the dining room, Louis?
Okay, yeah. I'll get you guys some utensils, maybe some bread.
Once the sausage was done, Sonny and Louis set the table with a loaf of sandwich bread and a jar of their home-pickled peppers.
Peppers? Yeah.
As we dug in, it was clear to see that even after a lifetime of eating this stuff, Sonny and Louis don't just take pride in this family recipe. They really enjoy eating it. And that's why they're pretty sure you will too.
The big challenge is getting more people to try it and to realize that there is indeed a quality Italian sausage available in grocery stores. Sometimes it might cost 25 or 50 cents more, but it's worth it.
I'll see him or I'll say, you want to try a piece of a sausage? And he'll say, no thanks, and he'll just keep on going. And I want to just run up and tap him on the shoulder and say, you don't know what you're missing. If you just give us a try.
Because at the end of the day, this isn't just sausage. It's the Argento family's most precious family heirloom. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Zach Harold in Charleston, West Virginia.
That story is part of our Folkways reporting project, which covers arts and culture in our region. You can find more Folkways stories at our website, wvpublic.org. Kentucky's governor appoints a new poet laureate every 2 years. Last year, Governor Andy Beshear named award-winning poet, essayist, and teacher Kathleen Driskell to the post. Driskell's poems have appeared in The New Yorker, Rattle, and Appalachian Review, among others. She's authored 6 poetry collections. Her most recent is Goat-Footed Gods. Bill Lynch spoke with Driskell about living next to the dead and America's most lethal cryptid.
Would you like to read something?
Sure. I'll read a poem for grown children that was in The New Yorker a couple of years back, and it's in my new collection called Goat-Footed Gods. Poem for grown children. In a poem I love, the husband slices open a pepper to find a church. But here at the sink, I've found a house, and inside the rattling seeds of a chandelier. It doesn't matter. My husband is too by himself in the hospital, and in our home at the window, I stand alone for the first time in almost 30 years. Then he'd rushed out into the dark, summoned to his father's deathbed. But I wasn't really alone. My toddler son slept, his mouth slightly open and red and wet inside, like a fledgling's. My daughter grew within me, close as a locket on a chain. When my husband returned, I remember he talked of the rattle, the death rattle. The children are now inside their own homes asleep, curled around their beloveds, but all so young yet. They do not think we will ever die. In their garden beds, if they are dreaming of seeds and light, they are dreaming of little blazes growing hotter. They are not dreaming of wind and flickering, and certainly they are not dreaming of smoke.
Tell me something about that poem. It's covering a life in there.
I suppose it's my pandemic poem, and thinking about generations and thinking about how life passes us by and how as we grow older, and especially then I think most people, mortality, especially if you were over the age of 60 and they kept telling you, you need to be really, really careful. It's sort of in a response to a poem by Kevin Proofer, who's an American poet, very talented, and his poem is called Seed. And so I've always loved that poem. It's been sort of like a talisman poem for me. And so I just was responding to that in some ways, but I hope it can stand on its own.
Do you feel like your writing or how you approach what you do has changed since then?
Well, I suppose I'm always changing. I'm always trying new things. I don't want to stay in the same place, and I'm sure it has changed me a lot. But I will tell you that my flood subject has always been mortality. My husband and I, for over 30 years, have lived in an old country church that we've made into our family home. And so with the church comes a graveyard. And so there's a little graveyard right next, about an acre next to me. And I'm always being influenced by that because I can look at my laundry room, I'm folding towels and I see these, these old graves. And well, some people say, isn't it eerie? Or aren't you creeped out by living next to a graveyard? But I don't really believe in the supernatural. I'm just not built that way. So I'm not creeped out. It weighs on me, but I consider it a ballast. It makes me think about today's the day, you need to live today. So not to be too trite about it, but it's true. I think about it all the time.
I wasn't going to ask about your house. I didn't really know about the house, but I'm interested. How did you end up in an old church as a house?
Well, we were coming back from grad school. We went to graduate school in North Carolina, and we wanted to come back home. We had a toddler. You know how that is. You want some support. And we were so poor, we couldn't really find anything we could afford. So we pulled over one day this was the day of maps, right? You had to actually look at a map to try to find out where you were going. And we found ourselves in the parking lot of this old church that just looked like an abomination, if I'm honest. It had been rehabbed by many people who did not know what they were doing and did not have a lot of money. It was all covered over with this sort of plastic siding. You couldn't see in really the windows. But my husband is a contractor. And so he crawled underneath, much to my chagrin, and found out that it was an old post and beam building and it's all notched. And so we bought it and cleared out all the horsehair plaster and just sort of uncovered it. And I still can't believe I'm lucky enough to live here. It's still, there's no nails in it. The structure of it, it's all pegged and all. And it was raised by Lutherans. some of the earliest Lutherans in our area, and was built before the American Civil War. We date it by the first grave over next door that has the same birth and death dates, which is 1845. I could read a little poem to you about that if you're interested.
I am interested, please.
Okay. All right. This is also from Goat-Footed Gods. It's called Walk in the Graveyard with My Mother. On her visit, my 80-year-old mother wants to walk among the old headstones of the small graveyard next to her home. She wants to see if she remembers any of the names of those buried there. Though no one next door is any of our kin, and her memory has been shot for years. Still, she leads her little graying dog through the grass, and I follow close by. I say, look here, this is the oldest grave, and stoop to pull the long grass and wild carrot, nearly obscuring the blunted stone of Alpha Beta Blankenbaker, infant, 1845, alone, abandoned here 100 or more years. I'm trying to recall, my mother says, which side of the family she comes from. On this earth, at this moment, it feels as if we, too, are the only ones alive who know that tiny Alpha Beta Blankenbaker was in our world, if only for a day, that she existed. She's from our side, I say.
I like that one very much.
Thank you. Isn't that interesting? I've heard, and I've never been able to do any research, but I've heard that people did, I don't know how often, because it hasn't really, I haven't seen it very often, that they would give stillborns the name, particularly girls, Alpha Beta. I don't know that that's true. If anybody out there can tell me it's true, please be in touch. I've tried to find out.
Talk about your most recent book.
Well, Goat-Footed Gods is what I consider to be sort of the third of an informal trilogy. I have Seed Across Snow, which is kind of about my house. Next Door to the Dead is about the graveyard, sort of my imaginings of people I had no idea about, really. And then Goat-Footed Gods is about, I never thought I'd be writing about this, but it's about a cryptid who's rumored to roam in our woods. We did not know this before we moved in, called the Goat Man. So you have the Mothman, right?
We have the Mothman, among others.
Right. And, there's Sasquatch, and then there's Bunny Man, which doesn't sound too scary until you think about him actually looking to your window at night. But the Goat Man is half man, half goat, lots of different origin stories. And he is said, teenagers think if you go to the end of our road, there's a trestle that looks decrepit. And in the middle of it, it's 8 stories high. But I can hear a train whistle go over it 3 times a day. So there's still a train. And so the thought is, or the legend is, if you go to the middle, you can summon the Goat Man. The Goat Man will come out to greet you, eat you. I don't know. But the Goat Man actually has been called by the Washington Post the most lethal cryptid in America because he has actual deaths attributed to him. And there have been 5 since we've lived here, and they're mostly young people, and there are many others injured who really don't understand what they're getting into. And it's just been, my books are never about one thing, but that is about me sort of musing about the myth and how the myth has changed and how dangerous the myth is and why, the world is pretty scary in a lot of ways. And why do we need to make up things that are scary? So it's just kind of exploring that idea and lamenting, what those deaths do.
We've heard about that over here with that particular cryptid. We spoke to some folks who wrote a book about paranormal activity in Kentucky.
Yeah, so I know that book, actually.
So they talk about that piece of track, and people go out there, and of course, trains, the train moves very quickly, and they can't get off the thing fast enough.
Once in a while, someone can hang on the side, but it's very deadly. It's a terrible situation. So,
how did you get into poetry?
My folks were from West Virginia on my mother's side. They lived about an hour east of Charleston. If you followed the Gauley River, you would finally get to the teeny tiny little town that they lived on. And my mom and her folks would go back every spring break, for weeks at a time. In the summer, we'd go and stay there in a cabin that was actually sort of made for us. It was sort of our place to stay there. And I would kind of scramble up and down Black Panther Mountain on the mossy paths. And the women in my family were big storytellers. I didn't come from a book-rich home, but they were storytellers. And I remember at those gatherings, they would bring down a big box of just a beat up cardboard box of photographs and sort of begin to sift through them and pull one out, see an image, and then begin to tell a story. I've often thought that that's why I became a poet primarily. I do write essays because the image almost always comes to me first, and then the story comes after that. So I remember also being in the third grade, and my brand new shiny teacher, who was probably 22 maybe at the time, asked us to write poems, whatever that was. I don't know. And I did it, and she was impressed by it. The next day, she asked me to go to the principal's office, and I was a very good girl, so of course I burst out in tears, not knowing what I was going to do. But she asked me to read that on the morning announcements on the speaker, and so it's the only poem I know of my own by heart. I can recite it for you. War is bad. It makes me sad. When my uncle gets home from Vietnam, I will be glad. And so I hardly remember my uncle because about 3 months later, we got a visit from men in dark dress Marine uniforms who broke our hearts. But, I have that poem, and I know that, I can't really remember all the fun stuff I did with him, that I loved him. I must have loved him because I wrote a poem for him before I even knew what a poem was.
So becoming the poet laureate of Kentucky, what was that like?
It was pretty fun, I have to say. I watched a number of people be appointed as Kentucky Poet Laureate, and I've known most of them pretty well. And so I don't know. When it happened to me, I feel like I got to join a club that I wanted to be a member of for a long time. But really what I want to do is, West Virginia is the same way, but this is a really rich state for writers, Kentucky. And I just want to amplify as many Kentucky poets and bring their words to as many different audiences. I'm working with high school students. I'm working with some projects in the parks, which I love. I love walking. We've all known from the beginning of time that walking sort of unleashes creativity and imagination. And so it's been really important to me to walk. And I'm lucky to have a number of really great parks nearby. So I've done some workshops. I'm like, go for a walk with me, and then we'll go and we'll write poems together. So that's been fun. And I have been busy, I can tell you. This is a state that uses their poet laureate. So I'm glad. Use me. So
Kathleen, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me and for your interest. I appreciate it.
It's been a banner year for winter weather across much of Appalachia. And you may be plenty familiar with snow. But how about snow mold? Louisville Public Media's Bill Burton and WAVE-3 TV meteorologist Tawana Andrew break it down.
Today we're talking about something that may have been hiding underneath all of that snow we had on the ground for a while.
As if the snow wasn't bad enough, there is something that I just learned about minutes ago, thanks to you, called snow mold. Tell us about it.
Well, first off, apparently it does not like me because it's been trying to take me out for the past.
Well, then clearly it's a terrible thing and it needs to go. Anyone who doesn't like you just has to go.
It really is not fun. But yeah, snow mold is a cold weather fungus that becomes more noticeable as our temperatures start to warm up. And some signs of snow mold are straw-colored circular patches in a lawn or grass that are either several inches or even to several feet across.
Yikes.
And
Okay.
the grass in this area may be a bit matted with a grayish white or a whitish pink type of hue. So keep that in mind. So snow mold develops underneath the snow cover and becomes a significant issue when there's substantial snowfall before the ground is able to fully freeze. For us, I went back and I looked at the data, and our soil temperatures were ranging in between 34 and 38 degrees before we got that massive snowfall at the end of January. So that put us right there in that perfect category. So the snow ends up shielding the grass from the cold and the wind, while also keeping the ground pretty saturated and warmer, because experts say that 2 to 4 inches of snow, which is what we saw on the ground in a lot of spots, or even higher than that, can keep soil temperatures about 30 to 35 degrees warmer compared to exposed bare ground.
Ooh,
So-
a perfect breeding ground.
Exactly. And guess what kind of grass is very susceptible to snow mold?
Tell me.
Kentucky bluegrass. Oh, surprise there. So Kentucky bluegrass, bentgrass, fescues, perennial ryegrasses are all susceptible to that snow mold. And once the snow begins to melt, allergies can start to increase because that residual moisture creates the absolute perfect environment for mold to grow. And that mold can trigger allergies with symptoms like a runny nose, congestion, sneezing, itchy eyes, and even in some cases, when it gets really bad, mild rashes. So that's definitely not fun. And keep in mind that it takes a while for snow mold to disappear, especially if it's not in direct sunlight, because snow mold will typically disappear once the ground temperature climbs to 68 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's just something to keep an eye out for yourself, for your pets, because it's not good for the two-legged friends or the four-legged ones. So if you're feeling a little funky recently, snow mold might be why.
That's why I love Science Behind the Forecast. It's always educational. Now I know there's such a thing as snow mold, and we all understand it now, thanks to this edition of Science Behind the Forecast with Wave 3 meteorologist Tawana Andrew. Thanks for the knowledge, Tawana.
Of course.
That conversation comes to us from the Appalachia Mid-South newsroom, a collaboration between NPR and several radio stations in West Virginia, Tennessee, and Kentucky. For more, visit our website. Soul food like cornbread, extra cheesy mac and cheese, and collard greens plays an important role in Black communities across Appalachia. In 2023, Folkways fellow Vanessa Pena spoke with Xavier Oglesby, a master artist in soul food cooking from Beckley, West Virginia.
When peace like a river attendeth my way.
It's a warm spring afternoon at Manna House Ministries, a Second Baptist church in Beckley, West Virginia. Xavier Oglesby is singing his favorite hymn, It Is Well With My Soul, as he prepares a macaroni salad in the church's kitchen.
To say, it is well.
Today, Xavier is cooking alone, but normally this kitchen would be bustling with life.
It kind of reminds you of when you watch a bee's nest and how the bees are, they're buzzing around and everybody's just so busy doing, that's just kind of what it looks like. But it's chaotic, but it's an organized chaos. The ladies at the church growing up, the old ladies, they'd be cooking, and all the ladies, they would bring their best recipes. Every one of them is good at something, at least one thing. And they pride themselves at that.
It might be macaroni salad or a pan of biscuits or chitlins. Soul food is a cooking style that is intrinsic to Black culture both in the South and Appalachia. Xavier says more so than the food itself, it's the way a meal comes together that makes soul food soul food.
When you think of soul food, that's the first thing you think is Black folks, because we were able to take nothing and make something out of it for a meal. And that's the way it is even today. You just got to reach and grab something. You just keep going, It's always going to be something that you may not have. But you can make a meal anyway.
Xavier has been cooking since he was a teenager. He's learned from 4 generations of his family, but learning how to cook in the Oglesby household wasn't always easy. As Xavier boils macaroni and cuts vegetables, he tells me growing up had its moments of strict instruction from his great-grandmother, Grandma Virginia.
She cooked for the superintendents of the coal companies. And, as you know, back then they were domestics. And that's what she did. She was known for that. I mean, this lady, she could cook, almost in her sleep. It was amazing to me just to see her cook. And now she would sing. Oh, gosh, she would get in that kitchen. And everything had to be done perfectly.
And she expected perfection from her great-grandson, too.
So she would stand there and watch me prepare a dish. She would have a wooden spoon in her hand. And she'd watch me prepare this dish, and I would have to do it exactly how she would do it. If I didn't do it, if I missed a step or whatever, she'd hit the back of my hand with the wooden spoon, like that.
Today at the church, women from Manna House Ministries talk in the next room while Xavier cooks. He says that in his family and at church, women were central to the cooking traditions he grew up with. So as a boy who was interested in cooking, he felt some resistance.
Eventually it was okay, but I've got, like I say, I've got 3 other brothers, and it was going to be okay. In this family, you have to kind of take your place and, you know, draw the line there. And so you just stand up and do that, and that's what I did. And then eventually, it was easier, I guess, for the guys in the family, the older men, to accept that and like that. When you look around today, you know, people make a living, guys make a living doing everything.
Now, Xavier is teaching his niece, Brooklyn Oglesby, how to cook soul food and family recipes. He's doing it through the West Virginia Folklife Apprenticeship Program, which is directed by the West Virginia State folklorist, Jenny Williams.
So this program is hosted every other year, but for a full year, artists can be a part of this program to pass on their traditional knowledge and art forms and skills to an apprentice of their choosing.
Folklife apprenticeship pairs are carrying on community-based traditional art forms and cultural practices, from fiddle instrument repair to mushroom foraging, all with the goal of passing on stories, skill sets, and traditional knowledge. Full disclosure, I worked with Jenny as an AmeriCorps member this year. This is an excerpt from an interview she did with Xavier and Brooklyn, where Brooklyn talks about learning from her uncle.
My main goal has been to learn how to cook, and he's taught me a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had to cook. I mean, I've lived on my own. I've had to make meals and stuff, and I've struggled since I've moved out with my own family. It's been a major struggle because half the time I'll spend 2 hours cooking just for it to be so nasty.
Each apprenticeship pair keeps in mind the future of the tradition and who they want to pass their knowledge on to.
I'm hoping I can raise 2 sons that know how to cook.
Yeah.
That's what I'm worried about because, like he said, his mom taught them all to cook clean and do laundry and all that stuff, and I'm hoping I can keep that going and teach my kids, and hopefully they'll be better cooks than me one day.
For the past year, Xavier and Brooklyn have been spending time learning together. Jenny says Xavier and Brooklyn are exactly the kind of pairing the apprenticeship program aims to support.
I was really excited to receive their application. Xavier has worked with us in our first round of the apprenticeship program. So to have him back again in this program is really exciting, and for him to bring on his niece to learn their family cooking traditions, that's especially something that we want to support.
As part of their work together, the Oglesbys have prepared food for community gatherings and also hosted events. One of those events is a card party, which is an informal community game night.
On the code camp, we used to have card parties, and people would go to each other's houses. On the nights that they would have the card parties, that we would have, the ladies would bring covered dishes, and they would have all kinds of stuff. They would bring pig feet, and somebody may bring some chitlins, and somebody maybe bring a pound cake or 2.
These card parties have been hosted by Xavier and Brooklyn at the Women's Club in Beckley, West Virginia. They feature live music, tables with cards for guests to play a card game of their choice, and old-fashioned soul food. For Inside Appalachia, I'm Vanessa Pena in Charleston, West Virginia.
Till next time, thanks for joining us as we journey throughout Appalachia. Our theme music is by Matt Jackford. Other music this week was provided by John Blessard, Benny Moten Cater, Tim Bing, Paul Loomis, John Ingram, and Blue Dot Sessions. Bill Lynch is our producer. Abby Neff is our associate producer. Our executive producer is Eric Douglas. Kelly Libby is our editor. Our audio mixer is Patrick Stevens. We had help this week from Folkways editors Nicole Musgrave and Chris Julin. You can find us on Instagram @InAppalachia. You can also send us an email to insideappalachia@wvpublic.org. Visit wvpublic.org/InsideAppalachia to subscribe to our newsletter and stream all of our stories. Or look for Inside Appalachia on your favorite podcast app. Inside Appalachia is a production of West Virginia Public Broadcasting.